Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the March 2025 session of the From the Bench Virtual Studio Tour Series. My name is Sarah Songer, and I'm the Program and Studio Manager at San Francisco Center for the Book. And today we're really happy to welcome Rae Lanzerotti as our guest artist. Rae uses disability access tools to make touchable, audible, and graphic memoir comics, zines, and art books. They've shown multimodal pieces locally at the Museum of Craft and Design and the Gallery of Ruth's Table. Rae's memoir comic, Embodied, is at the forefront of innovating accessible comics and will be featured in the display Zines Forever, DIY Publications and Disability Justice at the Wellcome Collection in London from March to September of this year. As a 2025 Hearts in San Francisco artist, Rae's heart is always here. And with that, we'll spotlight Rae. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. I love San Francisco Center for the Book. And I just want to start by saying that I took letterpress and linocut and book arts classes at the center in the mid-2000s. And then just recently reconnected when I started making art again in 2021. And I've taken a few recent collage classes, and I just noticed that my collage and jelly print teacher is on this call. Hello, Hope. And the San Francisco Center for the Book Biblio Shop is one of the only places that I offer my work for sale now. And I'm noticing that Katie, who works in the Biblio Shop, is also on this call. So hello. And I wanted to just start, well, first of all, again, thank you everyone for being here. This is very exciting for me. And I wanted to start with a self-description, which is a best practice for many blind and partially sighted people like me. I'm white, in my mid-50s. I have short, curly gray hair, and I'm wearing a black eye patch with a red heart on it and a dark blue sweater. My studio is partially in view behind me. And also, I want to say for my slides today, I do have a presentation, and I'll do the best that I can to provide some image descriptions with the slides and to read the text as well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And I might have missed this, Sarah, while you were introducing me, but if you do have questions as I go along, please do put them in the chat, because we'll have time at the end for that as well. So this first slide is a set of small drawings and text that I collaged onto a black sheet of paper torn from a notebook. And I've written the word hello in large print on a yellow background, which is also repeated in Braille. There is a tactile, yeah?
Sorry, there's a little bit of sort of audio noise, like a wind kind of thing happening.
Okay. So that's probably just me moving around. Please tell me again if it's not resolved.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So there's a tactile element known as a bump dot or a locator dot on the page, a drawing of a navigation cane, a microphone, and a loudspeaker to remind me to talk about audio elements of my work. And at the top of the page, a comic style speech bubble reads, SFCB from the bench with Rae Lanzerotti. Sarah, is the sound better?
It is.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the context of my work, the process, some projects that I've completed, and then at the end we'll have time for some questions and answers. This slide has a three-part drawing on the left and text on the right, which I'll read in a moment. The drawing is a triple self-portrait from 2023 of me with three different configurations of eyewear and vision, with glasses, with double vision, and in an eye patch. The script below the portrait gives a little bit of the backstory. It reads, I block the right lens with tape to prevent seeing double. An eye patch works too. The text describes my own call to action to increase arts accessibility for and by disabled people, to use disability tools artistically, and to infuse learning the principles of disability justice, and advocacy. So a lot of the content of my work has to do with vision loss, disability, navigation and adaptation, ableism, gender queerness, and community, especially within the context of my neighborhood and living here in San Francisco. In the next slide titled Access Art and Tools, in this photo, I sit on a sidewalk to make a tactile rubbing on aluminum from the bumps of a yellow curb cut. And I wanted to show this because I use this texture as a motif in a lot of my work. The bumps are an access tool. They indicate when we come to a traffic crossing. And I also find them beautiful, not only visually, but also tactually and sonically for the sound that they make with the navigation cane. So access tools are tools that people use for communicating, navigating, reading, all kinds of daily life activities. And so some useful examples that are probably familiar to many of you are ramps, sign language, wheelchairs, and Braille. In daily life, I use access tools like my eye patch, magnifiers, audiobooks, large print, and a navigation cane. So I use access tools in a multi-sensory way, and I do this to increase accessibility and also artistically. So this slide is very visual. I decided to include it as a map of my thinking about access tools and the decisions I make about mediums in making art. So I've clustered sensory mediums into 3 areas of touch, sound, and sight. So for example, for adding touch, I might manipulate texture, which I'll be talking about a lot today. With sound, I might work with story narration. And for sight, I consider elements like contrast and color. And I can talk about this more in the Q&A as well if there are questions. To talk more specifically about materials, this slide titled Materials has 2 photos with groups of the materials that I use across projects. So there are some here that are probably familiar tools of the book arts trade. Scissors, bone folders, an embosser, adhesives and tapes, erasers, rulers, thread. I've also included some access tools that I use artistically, a Braille labeler, QR codes that I use to connect digital and touchable forms, bump navigation dots, which are used to identify or locate objects, and large print text. And there may be some others hiding in here, but those are the ones that I wanted to call out. The next slide shows 2 photos related to the main tool after a lot of experimentation that I have landed on for tactile lines and dots, which I've used in the zines and comics that I started making a few years ago. So it shows a swell form printer, which is sometimes referred to as a fuser. This one is made by American Thermoform. It is an access tool used by TVIs, teachers of visually impaired students, and orientation and mobility specialists to make tactile graphics and maps. So this is a tabletop black metal box. The dimensions are about 6 inches by 5 inches by 20 inches long, and it has a heating element inside. It's used with a special paper called Swell Touch paper for tactile graphics. And I'll say a little bit about it because I'm guessing with this group, there's some interest in paper. The paper is white or off-white only, with a slightly rubbery texture on one side, and it's smooth on the other side. It's about the weight of a heavier copy paper, but it's more flexible than a cardstock. So the slide includes text describing the basic steps of using Swell Printer with the specialized Swell paper. Really just 2 steps: to draw or print onto the Swell paper, and then to run the Swell paper through the Swell form printer, and heat causes the black lines to swell and become raised, not color, but anything that's black. The background photo on this page shows all of the paper waste from one recent project when I was figuring out that my new laser printer is a little too hot and actually melts the swell form paper before I can get it into the swell printer. The next slide, titled Tools and Lines, presents two photos with rough examples of tactile lines that I made. And I thought it would be interesting to share some of this with you as just part of the conversation about the process. So there's one image with very dark, thick raised sections that I made with a laser print plus pencil. And then there's another one, which is very puffy, pleated, gray, curved lines that I made with a brush pen on swell paper. And they're both made using that same process of writing or drawing or printing onto the paper and then running it through the heated element. So this slide, titled Sutro Tower, San Francisco 2025, is a tactile swell print from a photo looking west toward our iconic landmarks, Twin Peaks and Sutro Tower here in San Francisco. And I wanted to see if I can enlarge it. I just taught myself this trick on Zoom. So you could see a little bit what's happened to the paper to make that effect. And this one, I just wanted to mention, might be very interesting to the touch, but it's not necessarily tactually legible. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but meaning that someone who is touching this might not be able to understand what the image is conveying without a little bit more context. And the same thing is true for something like this. This slide, titled Sidewalk San Francisco 2025, compares two tactile swell prints from a photo that I took of sidewalk cracks in my neighborhood. I'm very interested in obstacles, sidewalk obstacles and objects like utility covers. And I wanted to include both of these because one of them has color, the one on the right, and the other, the texture is more obvious, the one on the left. But these are both also tactile swell prints. So again, I wanted to take a moment to call out the distinction between something that is tactile and kind of artistically interesting in that way, a pleasure to touch, a pleasure to look at perhaps, and something that's tactually legible, meaning that if somebody is predominantly using touch to read or understand the story, could that happen with the shapes and textures of the piece? And there are a few design and labeling strategies that can help with this that I've been exploring. The other questions that I've been trying to figure out with this process is because I come from making comics, the considerations of durability, replicability, and affordability becomes really important if we're trying to make multiple copies of a zine or multiple copies of a comic to share. So along with legibility, those have been some of the challenges for me. I've also been exploring, as you could tell from what I've shared so far, what textures and lines work best, what kind of ink to use to make the lines, how much heat to apply. And I'm starting to use color a little bit. As I said, it doesn't swell. So making some decisions about that. There are also what I would call book arts decisions, like how to use the form, what goes on the smooth side of the paper, what goes on the tactile side of the paper, how is it folded, how is it presented, can it be collaged, bound, and sewn. So I wanted to share a little bit about projects that I would describe as finished projects, maybe, we'll see as I talk about them. My work ranges from mini zines made from a single page to large multimedia installations. And I mention that because I use the same materials in various scales and combinations. So the piece that's up on the screen now is Embodied, a memoir comic. It is an accordion style booklet the size of a postcard, made from 4 pages of swell paper printed on both sides, attached with bookbinding tape, and folded into 16 single panel pages. It includes a number of different elements. And I actually wrote made in 2022 to the present because I keep making new iterations of it. It started out as audio. I was trying to figure out how to innovate comics using an audio story. And then it's developed over time into this touchable zine that will be on display next week, starting next week through September in London at the Wellcome Collection as part of a show called Zines Forever, DIY Publications and Disability Justice. And even as recently as the last few months, we have been working together on a new audio version, which is up on my website, which I think maybe Sarah will put in the chat, and also a British Sign Language version of this same story, which is really exciting for me. Because I'm focusing on the swell paper today, I wanted to add a second slide, and I'll see if I can make it a little bigger here without messing myself up. There we go. This shows 4 of the 16 single panel pages unfolded at the start of the accordion book. And each page has a different part of the body. Again, the title of the piece is Embodied. So one page has my hand holding a pen. There's a hand drawing a hand, barefoot, and a person from the torso up resting face up or supine. There's Braille in 2 different sizes, which again, I'm happy to talk about if there are questions about incorporating Braille as I go through. Okay, let's see if I can get out of this view. Excellent. All right, nice to see you. I wanted to talk about as well, because this is another example of using the same tools slightly differently. This is a 2-sided mini zine made from a single page of the swell paper. It is small enough to be held in one's palm. The photo on this page shows the cover with raised lines, Braille, and text. The drawing is an outline of an almond-shaped eye. And I wanted to include a couple of photos of Nice to See You unfolded. As it starts out very small, and then as it's unfolded, there are all these different drawings of different shaped eyes looking at each other, eyes wearing glasses, some eyes that are just in the shape of apostrophes almost. And it's kind of like this playful hanging form that's almost like a paper slinky. And every time I've brought this to Zine Fest, this has been one of the most popular things that people have walked away from. On the back, which isn't really visible in these photos, there is a more medical style diagram that I made of an eye with different parts of the eye labeled. There are also colloquial greetings written throughout that casually use references to sites, such as the title, Nice to See You. And then also here, there's a page that says, take a look. Okay, so the last big piece that I wanted to share with you is called Depth Perception, Part 1, Touch Tourism. And as I said, I use the same materials in many forms and sizes. Touch is a large hanging tapestry of quilted squares of swell paper. The total size is 2 feet by 10 feet. This is a photo of Touch hanging on the wall. It was taken by Ashley Harris at Ruth's table as part of the exhibit there, Radical Resilience. And it shows 3 people visiting the piece as part of the exhibit. It's actually part of a triptych that also includes a soundscape and a hanging mobile. The quilted pieces of swell form, as I mentioned, spell the word touch. And I have a close-up on the next slide. As I mentioned, it's the same materials, but used slightly differently. And I actually consider this a book arts project because I used the swell paper bookbinding thread and enlarged textural images. For this one, it's images which are blow-ups of a knitted shawl that I made, and that in it, all of those pieces tell the story.
Well, we're just a little bit over time, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much, Rae. It's been fun to see your work, but also really educational and eye-opening and awareness raising for me to chat with you over the last couple months. So thanks very much. And
My
thank you all for
pleasure.
coming.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in April, so keep an eye out for announcements about next month's guest. All right, thank you, everyone. Bye.